Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about why machinery specs are the foundation for smart factories. And I think that's really the perfect title. The concept of smart factory started to catch on the past few years, but it's been really hard to move past the buzzwords. That's why Adam Fugate and I are excited to share these best practices and a live demo of what you can do today to build a foundation for your smart factory strategy. All participants will be on mute, but please use the Q&A to ask questions. We'd love to hear from you and understand the challenges or initiatives you have going on in this space. I want to introduce us quickly. Adam Fugate is our VP of Sales in the East region and really an expert when it comes to machinery. He spent over 20 years in the packaging industry in various roles ranging from IT to operations and sales. And as we like to say at SpecRite, Adam's really seen it all, and he partners with many of our customers to bring these solutions to life. I'm Laura Foti, and I lead marketing at SpecRite. I started my career as a consultant focusing on digital transformation while I was at Deloitte, and most recently worked at GE's Industrial Internet division. So I spent a lot of time talking about smart factory strategies in the industrial internet there. I'm really passionate about the intersection of technology and manufacturing, which is more critical than ever today. So I want to briefly go over our agenda. We're going to quickly discuss the concept of smart factory and hopefully demystify it a little bit, talk about the role that specifications play in enabling those strategies, and then talk about how you can use specification management to really build that foundation for your smart factory by first digitizing your machines, linking them to your products and facilities, and then operationalizing that data to really drive results. So what is a smart factory? I pulled a few recent headlines here that just shows the prevalence of smart factory in similar terms in today's conversation when it comes to manufacturing. There's applications that are vertical focused, for example, the food safety focus, or just kind of the future of manufacturing and talking about digital twins and their role in preventing and predicting the need for maintenance. But when I tried to define what a smart factory was, I actually went to Gartner, which is one of the leading technology research firms, and they described the smart factory as a concept used to describe the application of different combinations of modern technologies to create a hyper-flexible, self-adapting manufacturing capability. It is an underlying capability of smart manufacturing, which in turn fuels digital supply chain and Industry 4.0 programs. Now, that's a lot to unpack. And I think the important thing to understand here is that a smart factory is not just one technology. It's really multiple technologies working in unison and choosing a solution that can also be the digital thread to communicate across all of that. And what I've typically seen is that the starting point when people talk about the smart factory are typically putting sensors on equipment. And while that's a great place to start, really, when you look at the importance of machinery specifications in driving productivity on the factory floor, it's much more than that machine actually running. It's all the way from setting up that machine to buying that machine, testing it, starting to track usage and production, doing maintenance on it, collaborating with teams in other countries or engineers in other locations, and then optimizing productivity. And the reality is, when it comes to specifications for machinery today, much of this data is tribal knowledge. It resides in the minds of people who have been operators at your facilities for going on 30 years and are starting to look to retire. Or it's in a notebook that's in that facility somewhere in a hard copy, maybe a digital copy if you're lucky. Or some of this data resides in disparate systems that not everyone has access to in order to run the plant most efficiently. So when you look at the total life of machinery, it's much more than optimizing the factory when it's running. It's optimizing everything from the purchase to the setup to optimizing the performance. And specifications and machinery specifications play a really important role in all of this. So we've established that smart factory is really kind of a total strategy that is enacted by technology. We've established that specifications are a critical part of machinery and the factory. So really, we think specification management, we think of it as the foundation for that smart factory. And as companies start to think about deploying this strategy, it's really 3 steps. The first step is to digitize all of those machinery specifications into a single source of truth. And when I think about this step, while it seems so simple, many companies have factories that are spread out across the country or even the world. So getting this information into a single source of truth there's already tremendous benefits in terms of efficiency and collaboration there. The second step is mapping those machinery specifications together to create that digital thread through your supply chain. So think, machinery to line to what product is running on it, to be able to understand how everything is interrelated in your smart factory. And the third and perhaps most important step is to start to activate that data and operationalize it and really change the way you're running your factory to make sure that machinery is performing well, you understand how changes in production are going to impact your business, and that there's more awareness and visibility. So I'm really excited to talk about this roadmap, and more importantly, to turn it over to Adam Fugate to really show you how you can do this today and how you can start to really implement that foundation for your smart factory strategy. Take it away, Adam.
Well, thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. Let me get things set up here, and we'll. So thank you for that introduction, Laura, and thank you, and appreciate everyone's time today. It's a great opportunity to show everyone SpecRite. So what we're in here right now, this is a SpecRite, and we're going to start off and kind of go through machinery and talk about, like Laura said, smart factories and how we can manage machinery and equipment better, because all of these things in the SpecRite world are a specification, just as important as a food ingredient or a chemical or a finished good. The machinery which things run on and the lines and the application of machinery to how all those things fit together is equally important, if not more so in many cases. So what I'm going to do today is start off and just going to kind of give you a high level of how we're going to drill from machines down to lines, or from plants, I should say, down to lines, down to machines, and kind of show you some details and stuff we can capture. And just keep in mind that this can be modified to handle a lot, or say configured to handle a lot of different data sets, but we'll go through that and I'll talk about it as we go. So let's get started here and we'll jump right into it. So I'm going to start off with the home screen of SpecRite, and this is pretty typical. This is generally the landing page where users go to for SpecRite, and they can see things like here, if something is waiting on you to take action. It could be a maintenance event. It could be you're part of a new machine install, and part of that workflow process is you need to contribute data or information. So this is where you would go and you would see any kind of actions waiting in for you to take a hold of. And then also here's where you can see different kind of dashboards, and we'll show you how to get to the data behind these. But this is critically important, right? And obviously, we have things here like packaging and annual spend by plant, but these can be predicated on, machinery projects or capital projects, or sometimes it's critically important to know which machinery or which finished good is running on a particular plant or particular line. And we can also put information around to help you manage that better. So really quickly, I'm going to go from here. We could drill down to here, but I'm going to start off and just kind of start off at a plant level, and we're going to work our way slowly through the process. So here, this is all fictitious data. This is just completely made up, but I think it'll give you a good idea of how SpecRite works. So we're going to start off with accounts, and in our world, an account can be in a plant, it could be a supplier, it could be a customer. In this case, I have this set up as a coffee plant, and we can modify this because your plant's going to be a little differently, of course. So here we can assign, addresses, names, things like this. Here you can see this plant has 2 lines. We'll go into that in more depth in here in just a moment. And here's machines that are assigned to those. And you can actually, keep your data, keep your contacts information. You can see here on the right, you can actually include images and things like this. I can't tell you how many times in my past life, just trying to find a simple PDF layout of a plant sometimes would take maybe even hours to go find that because it's stored in someone's email, or I have to even go to another department or another group to go try to find that information. So with that, you can store things like your CAD files, you can store your drawings, you can store even pictures and images and everything in SpecRite to make it easy for you to find it. As a quick example, even if we go over here, I can show you, maybe one of the things we also had complications with back in my packaging days is we'd have to do AIB certifications and child labor law certifications and all these things. And so here's a place where you can store those things. You can actually have them connected here in SpecRite, so I can easily go in and I can say, here's my cleaning schedule that I'm going to use for AIB or my pesticide uses, etc. And I can have all that data in one spot, easily accessible to everyone involved, so that we're all on the same page all the time and we don't waste time looking for things. So starting off from here, and again, I just call this Austin Coffee Company because I live in Austin, Texas. So from here, we're going to drill over, and you can see I have 2 lines. We're going to start off from here, and we're going to drill our way down. So we'll go into line 1A, and you could have as many lines as you need, of course. But here's my coffee line, and I can have images. I'm going to have over here conveyors, fillers, packaging, date coders, etc., checker weighers, all my types of machinery there. And this could be as complicated as you need it to be. But here's my machines that I have listed here, right? And so each one of these can have their own types, their own descriptions, their own data, and carry all that data throughout the entire system. It'll all come together as we go through this, and you can see all this data. So, as you're building your factory, right, it's very complicated, believe it or not, especially if you're in a very distributed network, to figure out, when did a machine actually get purchased? When did a machine, get serviced? When did what was the capital number? What was the purchase order, et cetera? And you can spend a tremendous amount of time and energy, and sometimes get bad information. I personally have been involved in plant installs where we go cut a hole in the floor, and what we thought was a 6-inch slab had turned out to be a 4-inch slab, simply because we had bad information. It would have been fantastic to have that information up front. And so we had a project that gets delayed by many weeks sometimes when it's completely unnecessary. So it's just one example of how this can help. So here we're looking at our roaster, right? And this roaster is going to be common. It's going to have many lines potentially running off of it. And here's where we can start capturing data, right? The make, the model number, the weight, the dimensions. Did I purchase this machine? Did I lease this machine? All this kind of data is incredibly important, especially when you want to do analytics and you want to manage this across a distributed network. So you can include, the type of controls, and you can put rules in here also. So if someone tried to create a machine at a plant and you only accept Siemens or Allen Bradley or whatever that may be, we can put rules in here that can prevent folks from so-and-so guys making a mistake and doing something that isn't up to corporate standard. And here you can see the manufacturer, and I'll show you why this is important here shortly as we go through this. But it makes it really simple. If I want to go in and I say, I want to see all the machinery in my plant, in my region, in my districts, globally, that I'm buying from Bueller, or that I'm buying from Pearson, or I'm buying from whoever manufacturer that is, I can see all that data at my fingertips, and it makes it really quick, really efficient, and really easy to manage. And again, this can be modified for other data. And you can see here, any kind of data that's connected. If we go over here to the activity and maintenance, this is where we can start doing some simple things like setting up. You can see I have an upcoming event, machine needs to be cleaned. I have an event out here to tell my maintenance folk, Jack Rogers, that he needs to go out and log his maintenance hours for the week. And I'll show you how that looks like here in the calendar in just a second. But it's really easy to create tasks, to create events, if you will, which are like calendar events. So you can set it up and say, every Tuesday morning, I want a safety meeting with the maintenance team, or every, morning from 10 to 10:30 on first shift, we're going to have a safety meeting for all the employees working on that particular machine that day. So you can set that up here in SpecRite, manage it, maintain it by machine, by line, and by plant. So it makes it very efficient for you to go in and manage just if you're an individual site person, or if you have responsible for multiple locations. So we've kind of went through it, and so here's the machine, and we can see that I have this attached to line 1A. And if I click on line 1A, you can notice we went over to this lines object, if you will. And here I can see again, I can see my line. We've simply made a quick navigation from a plant to a machine to a line. We're right back where we started, right? So this makes it very, very easy. And I can go in and see, my date coder if I want to, or whatever I need to do. And I can actually record these events. I can even include maybe even the brochures that came with it, or even my repair parts catalog, or whatever else I need to be able to maintain around the data, the documents around that machine itself. So with that, we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit. And we're going to go over to the calendar, which I think is very cool. So on the calendar side, here's where you can start seeing all the events, right? So you can see, here's my calendar for the month of July. So I can go through and see, oh, here's a safety check on the grinder, on a PM on Tuesdays, and Jack is responsible for that. And we can even set this up so that it sends a notification to Jack. And you can say a half hour before this event is due, send a notification to Jack to let him know that he needs to be a machine ABC at this time to perform this particular function. And so it's very easy to set that up. You can set up new events, et cetera. We're not going to go through that, but you can even set them up for one-time events, reoccurring events. And these don't have to be just for maintenance folks. They could be for operators, for engineers, whatever else it may be. So with that, again, to kind of reiterate, we went through looking at plants, some lines and machines, but part of it gets to how are you going to use that data? What are you going to do with it, right? So if we go to reports, I created a couple of simple reports, and this is something that I've personally been involved in, is that you may have a lot of equipment and a lot of machines that you may lease and some you may purchase. So here I created a simple report that's going to show me all of my machines. In this case, it's going to be fork trucks that I have by lease, by date, by cost of my lease, et cetera, into SpecRite by plant. So here I can drill down, I can see here's my Austin coffee plant, I have Cary, and I have Dallas, a couple of plants that I created. And I can see all these fork trucks, right? And I can see where they're located, I can see what they're costing me, and I can also see here when the lease date was up. So these are all 5-year leases, and I have some of these that have already expired. And as most of you probably know, generally when a lease expires, the terms aren't necessarily very favorable to you, and you may also be missing out on, in this case, this expired in March, So you're working on a piece of equipment where you could have had a brand new one over the last couple of months. And then sometimes, hate to admit it, we've even had instances where you're dealing with equipment that should have been turned in a year ago, or even sometimes 2 years ago, where you've missed out on latest greatest technology simply because you didn't have control of all this data in one single spot where you could take charge of it. So that's just one quick example. I'll also show you a quick dashboard, if you will. So I created a dashboard, and this can be, again, maintained with a lot of different data. You get to kind of pick and choose. We'll help you put these dashboards together, but maybe you also have some simple data like machines by status, right? So you may be doing a machine install and you want to manage that and say, geez, how many machines do I have that are in process at my Austin plant? Because maybe you're going to a new line, maybe you're building a new machine line, maybe you're just doing some updates. And from here, I see I have some case packer, some sealer, and a palletizer that are all in status, right? So these aren't, they're still being developed or still being installed. So at some point, you want to go in here and you want to track this by stage gates, and you can actually put in rules and alerts to let you know when this is past its fate, etc. But again, if I want to drill in and I want to see this case packer, if you notice I click on it, since everything is hyperlinked, it makes it very simple. I can jump in, I can see it's a Douglas, I can have images of it, etc. Have all of my data, serial numbers, etc. Everything's at my fingertips, and all this data is reportable. Just like I was showing the reports in the dashboards, if you want to run a report that says, show me all of my machines by plant, by region, by status, how much did I spend on them? Since all that data is here in SpecRite, all this is at your fingertips, and you can do with it as you please.
We have a few questions, Adam. So I'll kind of read to you. One of them is how, and I touched on this a little bit, how can this help with equipment purchasing? I mean, oftentimes buying equipment is a very expensive endeavor. How can this help facilitate that process?
Great question. So really simple. Let's say that we're going to start a brand new machine, right? And so you can do a couple of things. With SpecRite, you can actually create a machine, and here we'll create a case erector as an example, and then each one of these can have a different machine type. And from here, I can fill out my data. One of the advantages of SpecRite is you can also use this to actually, once you have your specification in here, and you may have your own data, your own documents, you can actually share this out to your supplier community and actually request them to give you pricing back on that. And we do this with some other clients today where all their machine purchases, all their machinery standards are in SpecRite. Those machines are basically configured and built in SpecRite. That specification is shared with the supplier base. They send back pricing, questions, data, document, everything is in one place. It's all managed. All communications is managed in SpecRite, all the way through the approval process, through the purchasing process, through the award process. And then even after that award process, SpecRite has the tools available to help them through the FAT and the FAT to make sure that it's the right machine, operating the right way, and installed the way that they want it. So it saves them a lot of time and energy in the whole machine acquisition process.
That's great. Another question we have, and I think if you go back maybe to one of the machinery tabs, is how configurable are these fields? I think one of the things people love about SpecRite is not everyone wants to capture as much or as little data. And so how configurable are these fields to add, you remove, and so forth?
Yeah, it's a very, very simple. I mean, if we wanted to add, like all of these fields here on purchasing as an example, if you noticed, this one has some purchasing info, and I'll actually show you the differences between another one. We were looking at a fork truck earlier. So if we look at a fork truck, you can see where you can have different fields. In this case, typically fork trucks are more leased, and other types of machinery is more purchased through a capital project. So here I can actually have the type of data that I want. It's easy to configure this. It doesn't take but just a few moments, and we're more than happy to help you configure these templates by machine specific if they need be, or even if they need to be globally. It's very simple to make this your own, if you will, to meet your company needs, so you can manage the data that you need to manage. Some of this may be superfluous. Some of it you may need more data than we actually have here.
That's great, Adam. And I know customers love our templates, and it's pretty amazing how many templates we already have for machinery. Everything from industrial boilers to controls to things like packers and pallets. So it's really great that customers can get up and running quickly and still configure it to their needs at the same time. Can you talk a little bit about collaboration? When it comes to being in a facility, a lot of people need this information, right? Not only engineers, but potentially external partners or suppliers. How can people interact with SpecRite in that way?
So the beauty of SpecRite is, since it's all cloud-based, you can decide on how much and who you share information with basically at your leisure. So for example, it could be critically important, especially if you're leasing. In this case, we'll look at something, a fork truck, right? Kind of a ubiquitous piece of machinery that everyone has. But because of that, it's used by a lot of people in your plant. It's even important to your supplier, because your supplier, whoever you're leasing this from, may want, may be valuable to them to know that your machine is coming up for lease, and you can put alerts around that to let you know 90 days before it comes up for lease, as an example. But you can pick and choose how much data gets shared, et cetera. So for example, you may have on here like a listing of your repair parts activity, right? So that could be critically important, which is critically important to your maintenance group or your facilities group, but not necessarily as critically important to someone in operations, or maybe someone even in purchasing who's just managing the leasing contract of this, or whatever that may be. So all of this data can be secured down to the field level if need be through roles and profiles, so that you can make sure the right person has the right type of data. So maybe I am your leaseor for your equipment, right? So maybe when I log in, I can see the information on here. I can see when it was leased. I can see where it was used. I can see I can even see the maintenance calendar, right? But I don't necessarily need to know what kind of capital project you purchased this under, or what the actual budget was, et cetera. So all this data can be configured, I should say, through security profiles to make sure the right people see what they need to see. But again, the whole point is everyone's working off of a single piece of data, so you don't spend a lot of time and waste a lot of energy trying to track something down.
I think that's great. Speaking of tracking things down, one of my favorite outcomes that a customer mentioned to me the other day is tooling. And so oftentimes we talk about machinery and equipment, and for many CPG or beauty or companies and so forth, tooling is very expensive and very important to how they do business. And one customer said once they started to inventory tooling digitally, they identified tooling that they didn't realize they had, which resulted in kind of hundreds of thousands of dollars of found materials, if you will. So can you talk a little bit about that and the benefit of that to the business?
Absolutely. And actually, there's two pieces to tooling, right? So tooling it's important to know where it is as an asset. You need to manage it because it is a lot of money. Equally, it's or even more so, it's critical to the operation. So for example, if we're talking about a case former, or a filler, whatever that may be, there is tooling and forming heads that go along with that. You may have different size heads for your machine, et cetera. So and I can tell you in personal experience, having spent a lot of money buying duplicate tooling, or buying duplicate even repair parts and things that may be at another location, having access to that tooling linked to a machine. So if I'm looking at this roaster as an example, and I need to see what tooling is connected to it, that would be listed here as well. So not only do I know the plant that it lives at, I know the line that it's connected to, I can see any and all tooling that would be linked to this as well, which can become very critical because someone may ask me to run something, right? I may ask me to form a certain case or a certain bag that cannot fit on my line simply because I don't have the tooling for it. So it allows me to know what I have. Can I fulfill that request? Can I not? Maybe I can get it from another location, or maybe I have to buy it. But at least I know those answers up front, rather than waiting to the last minute. And anytime something is last minute, it always costs more, it takes more time, and delays projects, which is, again, very costly. So tooling is a dual-edged sword. It's generally not managed very well, Laura, and I think SpecRite's a perfect place to do that.
That's great. And then one last question. Someone asked, we talked a little bit about digital thread, and I know we went through this demo pretty quickly. Can you show kind of the capabilities to connect equipment to actual products? And can you talk a little bit about the value of having that visibility, especially when it comes to things like COVID, for example, where people are trying to better understand where?
Yeah. So, if we look and we can, you can have a particular finished good, right? And again, this is back to what I said earlier, as far as knowing what packaging or what line something is going to run on. So it becomes very critical. If I'm going to be asked to do something, or I'm going to do something at a plant or a line, it's critical to know, will it fit, right? So we do have the ability in SpecRite to say that, this particular item is going to run on a particular plant. And if so, I can even have rules around that says, oh, this item is too big, it won't fit. Or if I'm going to run, this product on this line is designated as no nuts, or it's designated as no dairy, et cetera. So if I get a product and somebody says, this product is going to have nuts or dairy, and I want to run it on line 2 at the Austin plant, but this plant is designated as no nuts, I can actually put rules in here to prevent that from happening. So again, not only does it get into an operational standpoint for efficiencies and to make sure you run the right product at the right place at the right time, could actually even prevent things like a recall, which can get incredibly expensive, and that we all know where that can lead to. So again, once we know the rules by which you want to do things, we can put those in place to make sure that A, you can assign it to a particular plant, a line, or machine, and B, is it the right place based upon the rules that you have.
That's a great overview, Adam. You know, I think when I come back to the theme of today's webinar of specifications as the foundation of a smart factory, one thing that amazes me is all of this stuff seems really basic, right? Understanding, you know, what lines have what criteria, but the reality is people don't have access to this information in an accessible way today. And so the fact that we're really helping get that baseline so that people can further build out more robust, you know, IoT and more buzzworthy items, I think is really critical. This stuff is really table stakes, and I think most executives would be surprised that a lot of this data isn't as accessible as they think. So appreciate the overview. Again, this is a very high level, so if you're interested in learning more about machinery, please reach out to us. Adam is available, and he's always happy to share his expertise. Adam, thanks for sharing it today, and everyone, thank you for joining.
It was my pleasure, Laura. Thank you very much.